Hey guys, Bob Gary here, Ancient Reproductions. A little bit about my background. If you are new here to the channel, I've been serious into reptiles in about 87, 88. At that time I started in a very large pet shop, which gave me a great experience of seeing animals from all over the world, the import world, a little bit of export retail, and frankly dealing with a tremendous amount of health problems because back then so many of the animals were imports. The health level was pretty deplorable. At that time, we were primarily, some animals were being produced regularly, but many were wild stock that we were trying to adapt and learn from and become competent in. Over the many years, I've produced many thousands of snakes in 12 species, both non-venomous and venomous. I've done probably the major focus of my entire reptile career has been boa and python production. And captive management is a high focus. So this isn't my fourth year, fifth year. This isn't my second clutch. I've pulled thousands and thousands and thousands of python eggs and incubated them in the world's best equipment, maternal, every which way you could think, incubators built in Home Depot, etc. So there's not many options and things I'm not aware of or haven't tried over the years. I'm not bragging. I just want you guys to know that you're listening to somebody that's had a lot of experience. One of those areas that I focused on in an effort to differentiate my care, frankly, and do better than the rest of everybody else is air quality management, because I never saw anybody managing air quality that much at all. In the beginning, many years ago when Burmese pythons were popular, we were about the third largest producer in the country. And even though we kept our animals immaculate, extensive quarantines, everything that we could possibly do at that time, we had respiratory problems like many people did. In an effort to improve that, and being a biology educated individual, it was not hard to see that we were putting, even back then, in the 90s, when racks started to become popular, we had the ability to really put a lot of biomass into a small area. And that really quickly, it was not hard to perceive from walking in the room after everybody defecates to realize that you got an air quality challenge here. And you got so many animals in an unnaturally tight condition. In the natural world, we've got fresh air, right? And really in captive situations, oftentimes, if you walk into a facility and it stinks, imagine what the animal feels like, right? Let's just start there. We've all had disgusting enclosures. I'm going to go clean some dirty ones here after this video, and you can see, this is my thing, this is my observation, is that you can take an animal out of a dirty enclosure, take it out, service it, put the animal back, and the animal to me exhibits lower stress. It looks more comfortable in its surroundings and it has less stress. To me, that is a health improvement. And if you can multiply that over more animals, you're really winning. And it's great to do for a pet too. So let's get into that. Fresh air, stale air. Stale air, fresh air. Fresh air has, as it's been explained to me in a very unscientific way, a certain amount of ozone, right? Ozone is not necessarily bad. It's a naturally occurring thing, O3, and it is oftentimes attracted to pollutants. When it meets a pollutant, it oftentimes oxidizes it, attaches to it, renders it harmless, kicks off an oxygen and an O2, right? And the air that you smell after a rainstorm, thunderstorm, it's been washed of particulate by the rain, by the rain, hopefully, and B, lightning and that electricity helps bring ozone and refresh the ozone. And so that's why the air at those times in your mind smells fresh. So in an effort to duplicate more of those properties, and it has a sanitizing effect, okay? That ozone has a sanitizing effect. When it's an ozone warning, when you hear like out in California, smog and all that, it's not the ozone is literally being attracted to the smog and the pollutant. So even though you don't want to be in a high ozone environment, the real problem is if you've got a lot of ozone in a natural environment, it's coming down because it's attracted by pollutants. That doesn't really apply in our captive situation. What we have to do is refresh our captive stale air environments with fresh air, or make it somehow, right? And you can do that two ways. Air circulation, open a window, which I know is flow air through mechanically, let's say through a exhaust fan on a timer every so every so often you're going to pull fresh air. But I know that every time you do that, like it's the summer here in Florida, we're just beginning, but we're already into the 90s. So I want to keep my room at 80. And if I pull 10-degree warmer air in, of course, I'm jacking up my AC load, increasing my electricity consumption, and, you know, causing a lot of disruption in my thermal gradients, depending on how I'm managing that space. So I realize that's difficult. But so when you have the opportunity, some of that has to be done. You have to get some fresh air in there somehow, right? So there's a zillion different ways to get it into a room, a window, an open door, etc. You're going to have to work with that on your own. You know, that's pretty common sense, right? But then, you know, what about the enclosure? And so I want to talk about some things about enclosure design that I see, which I think are fails. And I hope you guys, you know, can improve that in ways that I looked at it. You know, being here in Florida, when we started doing enclosures, really we were building them out of wood. That's really what we had for larger enclosures, 8-foot enclosures, predominantly 6-foot, anything of that size. There was really one company, and this is it. This was the company that was around way back, and this is a bush herpetological enclosure. This is a small arboreal cube. It's about 2 by 2 by 2. And this one is outfitted. This was just a show model because I was repping the company at some shows. I was down here at the expo repping them several years back for Ted. And so this is just sort of a display model, but I'll just show you and the features. But this enclosure, if you take a look at it, doesn't have, I'm just gonna leave the camera where it is, has one vent in the top where the light is. I'm gonna tilt it and the animal's gonna hang on for you because I think it's real important. I want you to get an idea of it. Yeah, you're okay. Okay, about that large on the top, nothing on the side. You can see through it. Nothing on the back, and nothing on this side. Same thing, this side, solid. So your one area to get air out of is the top. Now I've got a heating element on this because I'm old fashioned and I like incandescent bulbs, and so I've got an old fashioned heat light that gives me both my heat and my light cycle, right? This is Ted. And Tim, excuse me. And so what I want to encourage you to do is, I don't prefer this arrangement. This is an arrangement I think that came out of many people up north buying enclosures and expressing and the need to create a little bit of a microclimate here while your room was very cool. So people, when they started doing cages, really, and many people up north, most of you guys are far more north than we are in Florida, really didn't include much ventilation at all. So there's no ability, and this is very common. This isn't a bang on this company at all. Even today, disappointingly so, I see very small ventilation, and it's frankly because keepers don't demand it. So let me just talk a little more. I like vents on the side, and you can apply this concept to a large cage too. Same exact principle. And what I did, after getting tired of being a carpenter, I engaged these guys in, I can't remember, the late 90s, I think, and started working with them. Ted was awesome to work with. We took this and took many of their basic envelopes and greatly expanded the ventilation. Huge. I mean, 10x, easy. And that does some different things. It just allows you to get some of that. If you can get fresh air into your room, it's much more easy, let's say, to get some of that fresh air in the enclosure if you've got more pathways in. Because when you've only got one pathway like this, there's pressure. Because if I were to push air here, right, it's going to have a lot of resistance because there's nowhere for it to get out. So even if this enclosure had a natural breeze in this area, it would be tough for fresh air to get in here because there is pressure and that the air inside can't go anywhere, right? But if you have multiple vents, I'd like to see, I had many of these in production, but we did them with increased ventilation on the back and sides in addition to the top. And so if there's air movement in the room, fresh air in the room, let's get that fresh air in the room, and how are we going to get it in the enclosure? So if there's fresh air in the room and let's say we're circulating the fresh air, at least it had a chance to waft into the enclosure because you've reduced the internal pressure by giving it multiple areas for the air to get out. Make sense? And in a large enclosure, I also look at it as where you bring the heat element inside. Now, if it's a heat element that's going to literally produce some ambient heat, what I did was I put very large vents on the top of my enclosures, large side vents as well, to try to build, if I could, a little convection to hopefully maybe bring fresh air into the enclosure as well, and to keep my hot spot a hot spot, right? Okay, so here we go. Envision 8-foot cage, hot spot on one end, nothing on the other. If you have no top ventilation, which I have enclosures like that, basically as soon as the heating element comes on, in my case, again, an old-fashioned bulb, it starts to create an oven effect in there because the heat can't get out of the top. That's the most natural place it wants to get out. Now, those enclosures I'm talking about, they have ventilation in the front and sides, but it's just not the same. And so I think that's a really big deal. Why do I think that's a big deal? Because I see everybody producing enclosures today, and I can't tell you the size of the enclosures that I see having these little teeny tiny vents that are even louvered. So, excuse me. So the amount of actual air opening is microscopic. And you guys are, a lot of you guys are using more natural substrates. You're putting more in the cage, and you're spot cleaning, right? How do you ever get all the urine and feces out spot cleaning? You can do a pretty good job, really good job a lot of times, but I tell you, a lot of spot cleaning collections I go into, frankly, smell. And so that's not, that's your call, but if you walk into a room and it stinks, if you can reduce that, I think you're increasing animal health, you're reducing stress, and you're helping yourself, right? And you're helping your animals. So we need to be aware of, from everything from room design. If you're in a basement with no circulation, how are you getting air in? If you're in a room that's in the middle of a home that you want to keep very cool, but you want to keep your room warmer, can you get air in? And are you willing to condition that air so that you can have some fresh air in for your animals? I recommend the expense if you can. I think it's worth it. I also think that over the years, your cages will ventilate better. They won't mold. You can still retain humidity. Just cover the top up a little bit if you need to. Some of mine are big and they have so much ventilation, it's hard to retain humidity. Well, I'm in Florida and I really don't care. I have enough ambient, so it works for me. So fresh air, stale air, again, it's just a small different chemical difference, but I think it can make a big difference over time in the healthier collection and your ultimate productivity and profitability if you are a breeder. So that's something to think about, air quality, inside, outside, in your cage, how to bring it in. And frankly, let me just share an idea that I had. I saw some of those big cabinet systems, cramping. And really what I thought was, if you put a small type of blower motor onto the enclosure with some hoses and an exhaust, you could probably put a small blower motor up into your attic space type thing, and with a type roof type vent maybe made for a bathroom, you could actually have a pathway to create a fresh air pull through your enclosures and exhaust that stale air out the top of your building, as long as you, whatever that is, while you bring in fresh air from wherever that is. So just like a small amount of pressure. Now that sounds exotic. Imagine this thing with a hose coming off of it, and but honestly, I to the extent that people are spending on enclosures, heat panels, sophisticated thermostats that we have today, I think the expense would be quite low, because you could use one blower motor in the plumbing and service a lot of enclosures. Maybe you even just do that for the room. Not sure, just ideas. But when I see enclosures, large enclosures having no those little tiny vents, I'm sorry, but you're losing. You can try to manage a lot of things, my temperature, my food, but sorry guys. But I assure you, your animal will be healthier and happier and just do better for you overall and be easier to care for. So let's break with that. I'm at 15 minutes. Sorry to go so long. If you guys want to comment, if you want to share anything, please do. Also, one quick thing before I go on the ozone, on also the negative ions. Negative ions, if produced by a machine, tend to attach to things like dust particles that are oppositely charged. Then they clump together with particulate in the air. Then that particulate then settles out of the airstream, and that's the benefit of introducing negative ions into your environment in addition to a little ozone. There are machines that do that. I actually used to sell those. And so just be very careful. You don't want to overdo it with ozone. There are ozone generators out there that are used for crazy stuff like taking the smell out of, cars, if you've got a dead body or anything like that, and gross. And those are industrial level machines that produce a phenomenal amount of ozone. That's not good. That's not what you want unless you have a huge area that ozone can then dilute down into an acceptable level. The other machines that you'll find are, and for residential use, often will calibrate the amount of ozone to a specific amount of square feet of space that you're trying to work on. So just to dabble in, just something to look at if you want to address it. I recommend taking the simplest route you possibly can and just getting fresh air from outdoors into your collection somehow. Start there. Let me know how it goes. Thanks so much. Good to talk to you guys. And keep improving. Never stop. Take care.